Hello, welcome to another episode of the Astro Witch with me, Ellie Remo. Today we're going to be talking about the transits for starting in the week of April 10th, 2023, and we will also be touching upon some of the current happenings this week and before, really kind of looking into pop culture or the news and seeing what astrology has to say, like how that's all been lining up. So this week we're going to be talking about everything going on with Donald Trump. When I was watching the coverage of all of that, I looked at the astrology chart and I was like, we have to talk about this. So just so everyone knows, anti-Trump, anti-Republican podcast here. If you don't vibe with that, please leave. If you don't vibe with human rights and morals, please leave. Thank you. But we're also I want to end it with something light. So after that, we're going to talk about the astrology chart for the moment that the Barbie trailer was released, because I do like to have fun with astrology. It doesn't all have to be dull. So that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about the waning moons and post full moon energy, what to do, how to care for yourself, what is going on astrologically. And we're talking about the Venus movement. We're talking about Sun and Jupiter coming closer and closer, and it's going to be a great time. So let's dive on in. Just so you know, if you do want to join the Astro Witch Live, you have to join my Patreon. That's Ellie Remaltige, and you can find it in YouTube, on TikTok. I have it linked everywhere. And if you join, then you get to join live, chat with me, ask questions, you get to make topic recommendations. And this is Ellie Remo, the Astro Witch. And in this podcast, we're going to be talking all about anything mystical. This is another super astro heavy podcast episode, just because I really want to talk about some of the transits and the happenings in the world right now. But there are future episodes that will be all about magic and intuition as well. So I'm really excited for that. And thank you for joining me on this crazy journey. So let's get started. So we're starting out with the transits for April 9th, which is tomorrow. So technically this is a little early, but that's because I want to start by talking about the moon. We had a full moon, and it was a pretty crazy full moon, right? And lots of energy. And I think after a full moon is actually more important than the time of the full moon. Because the truth is, during a time of the full moon, people are often going to feel kind of tired, kind of out of it, kind of chaotic, and are naturally not going to do as much magic. In fact, full moons are actually the best time for releasing work. And after the full moon is where the energy starts to shift. So this is a little bit of post full moon talk. What to do when the moon is waning, aka getting smaller, because when the moon is full, it's at its biggest, and when it's at that point, there's nothing for it to do other than start to shrink. That's where we are now with the moon waning, and this is a time to slow down. You may feel your energy slowing down, especially because Mars is still in Cancer, which is dampening the vibe of everything a little bit. And slow down, focus on self-care. Energy will be lessening, and there's a restless energy as well, because we're starting off with the moon in Sagittarius, which is what you see here. So not only is it this energy of, oh my god, I'm so drained, I don't have too much energy to do what I want to do, but also Sagittarius wants to be on the move. Sagittarius wants to grow, and that creates that restlessness where the moon is like, slow down, things are getting slower, we're ending a big cycle. But Sagittarius is like, no, I know what I want to do, know where I want to go, I know what I'm creating, and trying to like make this mark and get things done. So the energy will be lessening, but there's also the restlessness of the moon squaring off with Saturn over there. So we have Saturn in Pisces, the moon in Sagittarius. And so there's this tension between what you know you need to do, between your responsibilities and what you feel like you're supposed to be doing because of that Sagittarius and, telling you to make your mark, but also because Saturn is all about like discipline and getting things done. So the moon is like, please slow down, please care for yourself. But you're like, I have work, I have to take care of my health, I have all of these different things. So it's just important to be aware that there is this need for self-care in this time, but also a feeling of being restricted around self-care. It's like you can't slow down, but you need to. So when it comes to these patterns of astrology, I always think awareness heals. Awareness is the energy that helps because we can't fight against the tide, but we sure can flow with it. So that's one thing, is the moon. And then we'll be having Venus moving into Gemini on April 11th, and it will be there for the rest of the week and beyond that. Venus is leaving its home, so there is a little bit of bittersweet energy there. As Venus leaves Taurus. And Venus loves being in Taurus. It is not only its home, but it's also a feminine or internal sign, which Venus is very, very comfortable with. And Venus is moving into a sign where it's not like terribly unhappy, but it is an external or masculine sign, and it's a little up and down, right? So if you see any mood dips or shifts around love, self-love, self-care, feelings of beauty, I do feel like it's interesting because we have this waning moon where we are meant to be kind of slowing down and caring for ourselves and focusing on ourselves. And then we also have Venus, who would have been supporting all of that before in Taurus, but then moving into Gemini. Now, there's absolutely some goodness that's going to come from this. Like, Venus will be blessing a new area of life, bringing luck to a new area of your life. We'd love to see it. I'll probably do a report about that on the Patreon, so go ahead and join, or enjoy if you are already a part of the Patreon. And on the Patreon, I break down what it means for each rising sign. So Venus will be blessing you in a new area of life, and will be blessing Geminis. So even though Venus is going to miss being home and loses some of its happiness and joy and power when it's not at home, I also think there is a lot to be said about the fact that it's going to be blessing Geminis, and it's going to be creating blessings in a new area of everyone's life. So it's not a bad thing, it's the natural movement of the planets, and Venus will be impacting us maybe in a positive way, but it could also be in a little bit more of a difficult way, and it's okay to acknowledge that. Venus has always benefic. It's not super unhappy in Gemini, not the worst transit, but it will miss being in Taurus, and for you Tauruses, you will miss having Venus home. So if you are a Taurus rising, or really if you have any like prominent Taurus placements, you're going to miss having that Venus magic, but just remember, that magic is moving into a new area of your chart now. Then we're going to be having the moon moving into Capricorn, and it seems to be happening around Wednesday until Friday. No, it is Tuesday. Okay, take 3. So then we have the Capricorn moon, and it's still a waning moon, so it's still getting smaller, it's still losing energy, and it's between Tuesday to Friday. And in this time, the moon is going to be unhappy. It doesn't love being in Capricorn. We can acknowledge that. And it may feel a little bit like low intuition. It feels like intuition showing up in different ways, right? Because this is the moon kind of working with some different resources than it's used to. And it's going to feel less like floaty and light, and it's going to feel more grounded. And it can be good because it can be a little bit more certainty, but I also feel like the moon is being pushed almost away from intuition when it's in Capricorn and towards, once again, that Saturn nature of dig your heels in and work. and take care of the things that you have to take care of, to be responsible, to be dedicated. So there can be feelings of frustration and stuckness, and overall, this is kind of a pretty weird week, if I'm to be honest. We still have the Sun and Jupiter, and they're going to be in a close conjunct, and that's great. But there's just so much weirdness going on elsewhere. So the Sun and Jupiter being in a close conjunct shows that there can still be luck and life, and that things are still growing. But it feels weird still. Like this whole week feels weird. And it's kind of like watering a garden. When you are watering fresh seedlings, you don't know for sure that something is growing because you can't see it. But it is, and you still have to trust that it is. And you still have to keep watering that garden. So that's what the energies of this week feel like to me. It's like watering the garden in the beginning phases where you're a little impatient and you're wanting to see the growth. But what you need is kind of to ground in and be patient. And Capricorn, Taurus, and Libras especially may feel some of this weirdness this week. Um, and Mercury is still in Taurus. So Tauruses are the ones who are going to be communicating it, feeling it, thinking it, expressing it. Whereas Capricorns and Libras are just going to be like, hey, I feel weird. And for Capricorn, it's going to feel like there's something in my energy that is not right. That is not me. That is not aligned. Versus for Taurus and Libra, it's going to feel like I lost something that was pretty good to me and took care of me. Now, on the bright side, Geminis and especially night chart. On the bright side, Geminis and especially night chart Geminis have Venus right now. And this is for everyone, but especially those Gemini risings. So that's renewed luck, love, beauty, and wherever Venus touches in your chart, regardless of if you have Gemini placements, that will be improving luck, love, beauty in that area of life. And Gemini risings get to step into their main character, like love interest moment. And Sagittarius risings may find that as well, because that's like the opposing sign. So Sagittarius risings, like for example, could see some really great movement around love life. Now, at the end of the week, we have Mercury and Uranus coming into a pretty close conjunct. So I pay attention to the outer or the newer planets when they're in close conjuncts with, or any other aspects within like 3 to 5 degrees. And that's what you see going on here with Mercury and Uranus. So I do want to say prepare for upheaval around communication, your mental space, the way that you're learning. It may feel unstable, but it may also lead to the necessary changes in order to create more stability, especially in whatever area of life Taurus is touching for you. And yes, this can impact things like self-care and other things that Taurus rules. And we also have a Moon and Saturn conjunct at the end, which is weird, worn down body feelings. And it's all kind of in preparation for the new phase, the new moon that comes next. But for now, it's very much like the energy seems to be winding down. This feels to be a really weird week, and I'm interested to know how it goes for people and what happens for people. Hopefully, some good things. Now we can start to move into some of the current happenings, starting with the Trump trial. This is the moment where I was watching it. It's not actually the moment where it started, but that really feels to be more compelling to talk about for me. Because in the first house, what you want to do when you look at event astrology is you want to look first and foremost at the angular houses. So the 1st, 4th, 7th, and 10th. Those are going to show the kind of overarching like energies and what's mainly happening. And the fallen Mars in Cancer in that first house is so interesting because it shows the disrespect and fall of someone who others had a great emotional attachment to and considered to be a leader. And we do know that this man, for whatever reason, still has followers and supporters. We can acknowledge that. But I also feel like this is the fall for many people in realizing kind of taking off those rose-colored glasses and seeing that someone who they worshipped and revered, because he does have a cult-like following, is human and fucks up big time. So the fallen Mars there in the first house is interesting because it is the aggression and the anger that his followers tend to embody, but it's also the fall of Cancer, which is a leader. And it is a leader who works based on of emotion. And say what you want, he works based off of emotion. He is not logical. He did not become president through logic. He became president through appealing to the emotions and making people become emotionally attached and perhaps even emotionally dependent on him. And that's why he invokes such extreme emotion from others. So the first house is like the topic, the power, the prominence. And it was the rising sign of the moment that I started like tuning into the coverage. And so that's why I find it to be very interesting. Now, in the exact moment that the court case actually started, it actually moved into Leo, which makes sense as well with it being around like star power and education in a court case, because then the sun would have been in the ninth house, and the ninth house is actually about like law and lawyers. But this moment where his, little fans were getting angry and I was watching like the news coverage was the moment that I was like, this is what it's about. It's not necessarily about when he starts talking, it's about when the people start reacting. And you can see that as well with there being a loaded 11th house, because the 11th house is the house of the people, it's the house of communities. So Mars in Cancer shows a time of tension and emotionality, which we know that his supporters and himself can be. Mercury in Taurus tells us what we already know, that this case is going to take time because Taurus is slow moving. Like, it wasn't going to be over in that one day. There's still a lot that needs to come to light. There's still a lot that needs to be communicated. And none of us get answers after this first day. There's also a lack of finality about all of this because the cardinal signs are in the angular houses. And what I mean by that is no matter what happens, he can still run for president. And he would. He would absolutely run for president from jail. That seems exactly like his vibe. So that's where it's like, this is the start of something, right? That's cardinal. But it is not the end. And I think we would all do well to remember that. And this does show, that a loaded 11th house, including the Venus in Taurus, which was still there, that this is in the interest of the people and that this needs to happen, even though nothing's really happening from it so far, even though it's just the beginning. We also have North Node and Jupiter together. No, we don't. No, we don't. We have North Node and Venus together. And the North Node does best with the benefics, so Venus. Now, it is also with Uranus, so that's showing a gain in kind of the chaotic nature of what's going on here. And yes, there will be like protests and chaotic nature from all of this. And that's what Uranus is there. There's like a gain of that. But being with Venus, it's also showing that there's a gain of luck and favor for the people, for the 11th house. And I think this is important because it's really people realizing that he was duping them. And for other people, it's going to be them being chaotic and closing their eyes. But I think this is an important turning point for American politics as well. Like, this is something new. And I think that's another reason we have all of this cardinal energy here, because this is going to be the first time that a former US president becomes a felon. Even if you do happen to be a fan, which I doubt you'd still be listening if you were, that's interest, that's something new, that's cardinal energy. And interestingly, there are still some people who are going to support him through this, because in the 10th house we see the exalted sun, we see Jupiter. There are some people who don't care about this. There are some people who, hell, maybe it even makes them more loyal. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. I do think the sun is going to shine light on his reputation in a way that's going to be favorable in the long run. With Saturn and Pisces, it's the bubble being popped for many. The reality of who he is and what his campaign has always been, which is trickery, is being popped. Because the Pisces dreamy nature has now been introduced to Sagittarius. The Pisces dreamy nature has now been introduced to Saturn, and Saturn is saying, no, you were in an illusion. This is what is really happening. And all of this relates to Pluto and Aquarius, revolutions, a new time, and clarity through destruction. So that's all I really wanted to say about that. I just found this chart of the moment I started tuning in to be very interesting. And let's get into something more light now. We're going to talk about the Barbie trailer. I just wanted to start with something more fun. I was looking at like I wanted like some funny celebrity drama or something. Um, but I didn't find any, and instead I was like, you know what? We are going to talk about the Barbie trailer instead because that sounds fun to me. Um, and the Barbie trailer dropped. This is, I believe, the time that it dropped. It's at least the day that it dropped. Now there is, if I got the time right, which I pretty much just used like an article that was talking about it dropping because I assumed they would kind of be on it quickly. But that would mean that Barbie is Gemini. Like the trailer drop is Gemini. And there are two signs that remind me of Barbie energy, Gemini and Libra. So I do love that. If not, it would have been in Taurus. Like if the article was late, it still would have been in Taurus, which is still Venus energy, which is perfect. And there would have been that Venus in Taurus as well. But yeah, Gemini is one of the signs that reminds me of Barbie. So I do like this theoretical astrology chart. And Venus is still in Taurus when it drops. So happy Venus, happy art. It would have been in the 12th house, which is interesting. I think that's a reminder that there may be more to this movie than meets the eye. I do think there's almost like a creepy, uncanny valley vibe to like the backdrop of it. And that's what I'm hoping for. At least some kind of weird, creepy vibes. And I think Venus being in the 12th house is showing like beautiful art, beautiful people, beautiful cinematography, but maybe a little bit hidden underneath the surface as well. We do have Jupiter and the Sun in the 11th house. Jupiter is rejoicing there, so lucky. This movie is probably going to make a lot of money. And also bringing friends together, growth, the start of something new. This could be, making friends on set. This could be a bunch of friends who played with Barbies growing up going to see the movie together. We do have Libra in the 5th house, so that Venusian creativity, and Saturn in the 10th house, which is a dedicated Saturn in the 10th house in Pisces, which is a dedicated crew coming together to make something a reality. Um, and that's all I really wanted to say about this. It's, I know, not the most interesting or notable thing, but I thought it would be a fun way to wrap up this week's podcast. Remember, if you have any topics you would like to recommend, join us over on Patreon, comment below, do what you gotta do. And thank you so much for listening to The Astro Witch with me, Ellie Remo. Bye!